What if the grocery store closed tomorrow, just for 30 days, and everything you needed had to come from your own property? Most people assume they'd figure it out. Grow some lettuce, maybe tomatoes, but here's the thing. Lettuce won't keep you fed. It has almost no calories. You could eat it 3 times a day and still be running on empty by week 2. The plants that actually sustain you for a full month are not the ones most people think to grow first. And that gap in the plan is exactly what this video is going to fix. By the end, you'll know what a real 30-day backyard food system looks like, how much space it actually needs, and the one type of crop that most backyard gardeners completely overlook, even though it's the easiest thing to grow. A 30-day backyard food system isn't about growing everything you'd normally eat. It's about covering 3 specific things: calories, protein, and volume. Enough food to actually feel fed, not just technically alive. When people plant a garden, they start with what they like: peppers, zucchini, fresh herbs, and those are great additions. But a garden built around preference is a very different thing from a garden built around sustenance. I remember mapping out my own growing space and realizing the entire plan was essentially a salad. Colorful, fresh, and completely insufficient past week 1. The shift happened when I stopped thinking about what I wanted to grow and started thinking about what a body actually burns through over 30 days. The space required is smaller than most people assume. A well-organized 200 square feet, roughly the size of a parking spot, can carry a meaningful share of one person's food needs when the right crops are in the ground in the right order. The system has to be layered, and each layer has a job. That's what the rest of this video is going to walk through. If you want to keep building on this, growing more food at home, cutting the grocery bill, getting your backyard actually working for you, subscribing here means you'll catch the next videos as they come out. And we go a lot deeper into year-round production. So let's build this layer by layer, because the order here is what makes the difference between a garden that produces and one that just sits there, looking busy. The first layer is the fast producers, crops that go from seed to edible in under 30 days: radishes, spinach, leaf lettuce, green onions. They won't carry the caloric load, but they do 2 specific things. They fill nutritional gaps that heavier crops don't cover, and they give you something fresh to eat, while the slower plants are still developing. In a 30-day stretch, that matters more than people expect. Eating the same dense staples every day wears on a person faster than the hunger itself. Fast producers break that monotony. The second layer is where most backyard gardens fall apart, and this is the detail I mentioned at the start: calories. Specifically, calorie-dense crops that produce enough energy per square foot to actually sustain someone. Sweet potatoes are the single most underrated food security crop in the American backyard. 100 square feet managed well can yield between 100 and 150 pounds of food. They store without refrigeration for months. They grow in almost every U.S. climate with minimal input, and almost nobody plants them because they don't photograph well. That's the counterintuitive part. The crops that look impressive, big tomatoes, colorful peppers, rows of zucchini, are among the least calorie-efficient things you can grow. A zucchini is 95% water. It tastes great, but it won't sustain you through a hard stretch. The crops that actually feed people when it counts tend to be the unglamorous ones: root vegetables, dried beans, winter squash, the stuff that doesn't make it onto anyone's garden Instagram page. Which brings us to the third layer: beans, pole beans, bush beans, fast-growing, productive, and when dried, they become a long-term food storage crop that requires no special equipment to preserve. This is exactly what victory gardens during World War II were built around. At their peak in 1943, home and community gardens across the U.S. produced an estimated 40% of the country's fresh vegetables. The government wasn't telling people to grow salad. They were telling them to grow beans, root crops, and anything that stored through winter. Ordinary people, ordinary backyards, real results under actual pressure. Now, most people get to this point and understand the concept, but freeze when it comes to the actual layout. Which crops go where, how to sequence them, what happens when things compete underground. When I first tried to design a system that could realistically carry weight through a disruption, that's exactly where I got stuck. Too many variables, no clear framework to organize them. The Backyard Miracle Farm System is something I'd point anyone toward who hits that same wall. It's a manual built around a small, integrated setup, a growing space paired with a composting loop that feeds it continuously. So the system sustains itself over time, rather than depending on outside inputs every season. It's not a course or a subscription, just a practical guide for people who want their backyard to function as a real food source. I'll leave the link in the pinned comment if you want to look at it after the video. Back to the layout, and the way to think about those 200 square feet is in thirds. One for fast cycle producers, one for calorie crops, one for legumes. That's not a rigid formula, it's a working framework. Each section has a different harvest timeline, which means you're pulling food from the space continuously instead of waiting on one big harvest that comes all at once. The habit that ties all three layers together is succession planting. The moment you pull a fast crop, something else goes in. The soil never sits empty. That one shift from thinking in seasons to thinking in cycles is what separates a productive grow-your-own-food setup from a garden that peaks in August and goes quiet by September. Before we wrap this up, where are you watching from right now? Drop your city and country in the comments. And if you've already started growing food at home, tell me what you planted first. I have a feeling a lot of us started with the same mistakes. The gap between where most people are right now and where they need to be is smaller than it feels. That's the part that surprised me most when I actually started building this out. It's not about having more land or more time. It's about planting the right things in the right order and treating that space like it has a job to do. A backyard garden stops being a hobby the moment you start thinking of it as infrastructure, something that works quietly in the background, producing real food whether you need it urgently or not. Sweet potatoes in the ground, beans drying on the shelf, a new round of greens going in the moment the last one comes out. That system doesn't require perfection, it just requires a start. The families who handle disruption well aren't the ones who panicked and prepared at the last minute. They're the ones who built something small and consistent before they needed it. And a year from now, the difference between having that system and not having it won't feel small at all. If this gave you a clearer picture of what a real backyard food system looks like, subscribe. There's a lot more coming on growing food at home through every season. The Backyard Miracle Farm System link is in the pinned comment if you want a structured way to put all of this into practice. And drop a comment before you go. I want to know where you're watching from.